My name is Natalie Warren. I'm 27 years old, and for the longest time, I thought exhaustion was just the price of building a future. I work in IT infrastructure for a healthcare company. It sounds boring when you say it quickly, but when hospital systems crash, people notice. Doctors can't pull records. Nurses can't update charts. Entire departments start calling in panic because some invisible piece of technology stopped doing what everyone assumed it would always do. So when my phone rang, I answered. At 7 in the morning. At midnight. On weekends. During dinners I had barely sat down for. The job paid well, about $78,000 a year, but it came with a cost. Some days I left before the sun was fully up and came home when the city had already gone quiet. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was doing it for stability. For us, at least, that was what I believed. My boyfriend, Evan Miller, hated my hours. At first, he said it softly. "You're working late again?" Then it became colder. "Must be nice having a job more important than your relationship." By the time we had been together for 2 years, the complaint had become part of the furniture. Always there. Always waiting. Evan had moved into the apartment I shared with my roommate, Caleb Brooks, about 14 months earlier. Caleb and I had known each other since college. He was easygoing, funny, the kind of friend who could sleep through a thunderstorm and somehow still make rent on time. The apartment itself was technically mine. That mattered later. I was the primary leaseholder. My name was on the actual contract, my credit check, my background check, my security deposit, $3,200 I had saved from months before moving in 3 years ago. Caleb was listed as an occupant after he moved in. Evan was added later, when I thought we were becoming serious. The rent was $2,400 a month. Caleb and I split it evenly, $1,200 each. Evan didn't pay rent. He said he couldn't afford it on his part-time coffee shop income, so he helped with groceries and utilities instead. $400 a month. Sometimes. I accepted it because I loved him, and love has a way of dressing up bad math as patience. Looking back, the warning signs weren't subtle. They were just inconvenient. Evan stopped asking when I'd be home and started assuming I wouldn't be. He spent more evenings alone in the apartment while Caleb was there. I would come home to them on the couch, laughing at something that died the second I walked in. Sometimes Caleb looked guilty. Sometimes Evan looked annoyed. And sometimes I felt like a stranger entering my own home. But I trusted them. That was my mistake. 3 weeks ago, I came home early. A server migration that was supposed to last until 2 in the morning ended ahead of schedule. The vendor team finally got organized. My manager released me around 8, and for once, I drove home feeling light. I didn't text Evan. I wanted to surprise him. Maybe order pizza. Maybe watch something stupid. Maybe remind him that I was still there, beneath the job, beneath the emergency calls, beneath the tired eyes and half-finished conversations. The apartment was too quiet when I opened the door. Not peaceful. Wrong. Caleb's shoes were by the entrance. Evan's jacket was tossed over the chair. There was a woman's purse on the kitchen counter. I remember staring at it longer than I should have. Black leather, gold zipper, a little red keychain shaped like a heart. Then I heard a sound from my bedroom. My bedroom. For a moment, my body understood before my mind did. My hand stayed on the strap of my laptop bag. My breath shortened. The hallway seemed longer than usual, like the apartment was stretching itself out just to make me suffer for a few more seconds. I pushed the door open. Evan was in my bed with Vanessa, his ex-girlfriend. Not a stranger, not some random mistake from a bar. Vanessa, the woman he had once sworn was ancient history. Caleb was standing near the doorway inside the room, half-dressed, not involved the way Evan was, but present, watching, covering, helping hide it. His face went pale the second he saw me. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. 3 seconds can hold an entire lifetime when your future breaks inside them. Evan scrambled upright, pulling the sheet around himself. "Natalie!" I didn't scream. That surprised me most. I just turned around, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. Too steady. like my body had decided emotion could wait until survival was finished. A few minutes later, Evan came out wrapped in my sheet. Vanessa hovered behind him, eyes lowered. Caleb stood near the hallway, silent, useless, cowardly. "Babe," Evan said, "I can explain." I took a sip of water. "I'm sure you can. It's not what it looks like." I looked at him, then at Vanessa, then at Caleb. "It looks like you brought your ex into my bed while I was at work, and my roommate helped you hide it." Evan's face changed. The guilt cracked, and something uglier came through.
Defensiveness.
"You're always at work," he said. "What did you expect?" And that was the moment something in me went quiet forever. Not broke, quiet. Because there it was, the truth, finally said out loud. He didn't see my work as sacrifice. He saw it as permission. I set the glass in the sink. "Fair point." Evan blinked. "What?" "Fair point," I repeated. "I'm always at work. That must have been very hard for you." His confusion almost made me laugh. "So you understand?" he asked. I looked at him one last time. "I understand perfectly." Then I walked past all three of them, picked up my laptop bag from the living room, grabbed my keys, and left. No shouting. No thrown plates. No begging. Just the sound of the door closing behind me. That night, I drove to my coworker's apartment. Her name was Rachel, and I had helped her through a brutal breakup the year before. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask for details. She just stepped aside. I slept on her couch for maybe 2 hours. By sunrise, the shock had turned into clarity. And clarity, I learned, can be colder than anger. The first call I made was to the landlord, because Evan had forgotten something important. The bed might have been mine. The apartment was, too. The first thing the landlord said, after I explained I needed to remove myself from the lease, was, "Is everything okay?" I almost laughed. It wasn't the kind of question you answer honestly. "It's a change in living circumstances," I said. "I need to know my options." There was a pause on the other end, papers shuffling, the quiet clicking of a keyboard. "Well," he said finally, "since you're the primary leaseholder, you can submit a 30-day notice to terminate your portion of the agreement. After that, the remaining occupants would need to qualify for a new lease in their own names." Exactly what I needed. And if they don't qualify, then they'll need to vacate by the end of the notice period. I leaned back against Rachel's kitchen counter, staring out the window as the morning light crept over a city that suddenly felt very different. "I'll submit the paperwork today." "Understood. Once it's processed, I'll notify them directly." "Please do." When the call ended, I didn't feel powerful. I felt steady, like I had finally stepped onto solid ground after months of not realizing I was sinking. The second call was to the utility companies. Electricity, internet, both in my name. I scheduled everything to be transferred out in 30 days. Same timeline, same ending. The third call was to Rachel's landlord, asking if I could stay a few weeks longer than planned. She didn't even wait for the answer. "You're staying as long as you need," she said from across the room, arms crossed, like she was daring anyone to disagree. I nodded. "Thank you." Over the next 2 days, I went back to the apartment twice. Both times, I made sure Evan and Caleb weren't there. The first trip was quick. Clothes, documents, anything that mattered. The essentials of a life I had built and somehow lost in one evening. The second trip was heavier. Rachel came with me. We moved my desk, my monitors, my gaming setup, the things I had paid for before Evan ever entered the picture, the things that were undeniably mine. The apartment felt hollow, not empty.
Contaminated.
The couch stayed, the TV stayed, most of the kitchen stayed. Not because I couldn't take them, because I didn't want anything that reminded me of what had happened there. Before I left, I stood in the living room for a moment longer than necessary. Then I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote, "Lease termination notice incoming. You have 30 days. Figure it out." I left it on the counter next to that same black purse. 48 hours later, the notice arrived. I didn't see it, but I felt it. My phone started vibrating nonstop around noon. "Evan." Again. 19 missed calls in under 2 hours. I let every single one go to voicemail. Curiosity got the better of me eventually. The first message was confusion. Natalie, what is this? Call me back, right now. The fifth was anger. You can't just do this. This is my home too. The 12th was desperation. I know you're upset, okay? But this is insane. We can fix this. Just talk to me. The last one was something else entirely. If you don't call me back, I'm calling the cops. This is illegal. I deleted them all. Then I blocked his number. Caleb tried a different approach. A text message. Long. Paragraphs. The kind of message people write when they're trying to sound reasonable instead of guilty. We've been friends for years. You're overreacting. Things just happened. Don't throw everything away. I read it twice, not because I needed to, because I wanted to see if there was even a single sentence that sounded like accountability. There wasn't. So I replied with one line. You threw it away when you helped him lie to me. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He never answered. The landlord called me later that afternoon. They came into the office, he said carefully, demanding to know if there's a way to stop the termination. And I explained there isn't. You followed the terms of the lease. Everything is valid. I closed my eyes briefly. Did they ask about qualifying? Yes. And? Another pause. They don't meet the income requirements. Of course they didn't. The building required tenants to make 3 times the monthly rent in combined gross income, $7,200. Evan and Caleb together didn't even come close. Did you tell them that? I told them what they needed to qualify, he said diplomatically, which meant yes. They asked about alternatives, he added. Cosigner, extension, but nothing changes unless you withdraw your notice. I won't. I figured. When the call ended, I expected to feel something heavier.
Guilt. Regret.
Anything. But all I felt was a strange sense of inevitability, like this outcome had been building long before I ever opened that bedroom door. 3 days later, I got another call, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. What the hell do you think you're doing to my son? Evan's mother. Of course. I leaned against the wall, letting the silence stretch just enough to make a point. Hello to you too. He told me you're trying to make him homeless over some misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? He said you two were having problems and things got complicated. I let out a slow breath. The complication, I said evenly, was your son bringing his ex-girlfriend into my bed while I was at work, and my roommate helping him cover it up.
Silence.
Not the kind you fill, the kind that fills itself. He didn't tell me that part, she said finally. I'm sure he didn't. Another pause, longer this time. If you're worried about him, I added, you might want to consider co-signing whatever lease he tries to get next. She didn't respond. She just hung up. And somehow, I knew that conversation had already changed more than anything Evan had said to me. A week after the notice went out, I found my new apartment. 1 bedroom, 20 minutes from work. Smaller.
Quieter.
Mine. The application was approved faster than I expected. When the confirmation email came through, I stared at it for a long time. It didn't feel like starting over. It felt like reclaiming something. The move-in date was set for 2 weeks out. The lease termination deadline was 3 weeks away. Evan and Caleb were running out of time. And then, just when things had finally gone quiet, Evan showed up at my work. I was in the middle of a meeting when my desk phone rang.
Internal line.
I almost ignored it. Almost. Hey, Natalie, the receptionist said, her voice hesitant. There's someone here asking for you. She's kind of upset. For a second, my brain didn't connect the dots. Then it did. I'll be right down. I excused myself from the meeting, ignoring the curious looks from my coworkers as I stepped out. The hallway felt longer than usual, every step tightening something in my chest I thought I had already dealt with. But closure isn't a straight line. It loops back when you least expect it. The lobby doors slid open, And there she was, Vanessa, Evan's ex, the woman I had seen in my bed. She looked different now, not polished, not confident. Her hair was pulled back messily, dark circles under her eyes. Her arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to hold something together that was already falling apart. "We need to talk," she said, the second she saw me. "No," I replied. "We don't." Her jaw tightened. "You're ruining his life." I almost smiled. "He's doing that just fine on his own." "You didn't have to go this far," she snapped. "Ending the lease? Kicking him out? That's extreme." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Not for her, but for the people watching. "You slept with someone else's boyfriend in her bed," I said. "And you're here telling me I went too far?" Her eyes flickered. For a second, guilt surfaced. Then it hardened into something else. "He was lonely," she said. "You were never there." There it was again. That justification. That same sentence, dressed in different words. I let out a slow breath. "I was working," I said, "to pay for the apartment he lived in, the bed you were in, the utilities you used when you visited." She flinched. "He didn't ask you to do that." "No," I said. "He just benefited from it." A couple of my coworkers had stopped pretending not to listen. The receptionist was watching openly now. Vanessa noticed. Her voice dropped, but the edge didn't leave. "You're acting like you're perfect." "I'm not," I said. "But I didn't betray anyone." Silence stretched between us. Then she tried a different approach. Softer. Almost pleading. "He's falling apart," she said. "He can't afford anywhere. Caleb's blaming him for everything. They're fighting constantly. You could fix this with one phone call." Fix. The word landed wrong, like I was responsible for cleaning up something I didn't break. "I'm not fixing anything," I said calmly. "I'm letting it end." Her eyes searched my face, like she was looking for hesitation, for weakness, for the version of me that would have said yes. She didn't find it. "You're really going to let him lose everything?" she asked. I held her gaze. "He already did." For a moment, I thought she might argue again. Instead, her shoulders dropped, not in defeat, in realization, like she was finally understanding that this wasn't a situation she could talk her way out of. "You've changed," she said quietly. I almost laughed. "No," I said. "I just stopped ignoring things." Security stepped a little closer, not aggressive, just present.
A silent signal.
Vanessa noticed. She took a step back. "This isn't over," she said. But there was no conviction behind it. "It is for me." She hesitated one last second. Then she turned and walked out. The lobby doors closed behind her, with a soft, final sound. When I got back upstairs, my boss was waiting near the conference room. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "You sure you don't want to talk to HR about whatever that was?" I shook my head. "It's handled." It wasn't. But it would be. Over the next week, the situation unraveled exactly the way I expected, and somehow worse. A mutual friend, one of the few people still talking to both Caleb and Evan, started filling in the gaps. "They're not even speaking half the time," he told me over coffee. "When they are, it's just arguing." "About what?" I asked. "Everything. Evan says Caleb should have stopped him. Caleb says Evan dragged him into it. Vanessa's in and out of the apartment, which doesn't help." Of course she was. "They haven't found a new place?" I asked. He shook his head. "Caleb's been looking at studios, but his credit's not great. Evan's been asking friends if he can crash somewhere, but people know what happened now."
Consequences.
They don't always come fast, but when they do, they stack. I moved into my new apartment a few days later. It wasn't big, just enough space for a bed, a desk, and the pieces of my life I had chosen to keep. But the first night there, I noticed something. Silence. Not the heavy kind. Not the kind that makes you feel alone. The kind that feels like breathing for the first time in months. No tension. No wondering what I'd walk into. No second guessing. Just quiet. I sat on the floor that night, back against the wall, eating takeout straight from the container, and for the first time since everything happened, I felt at peace. A few days later, while setting up my new budget, I noticed something I hadn't before, or maybe I had, and ignored it. I went back through my bank statements, tracing expenses, making sure everything lined up. That's when I saw it. Evan's contributions, or lack of them. For the past 4 months, he hadn't sent his share of utilities, not once. $400 a month. $1,600 total. Gone. I stared at the numbers for a long time. Not because of the money, because of what it meant. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he'd been taking advantage of me financially.
Quietly, consistently.
While I worked longer hours to cover everything else. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Lesson learned, I murmured to the empty room, and somehow that hurt more than walking in on him. 2 days later, Caleb finally reached out again. Different tone this time. No excuses. No long paragraphs. Just desperation. I know I messed up, the message read. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for more time. The landlord's starting eviction if we don't leave. Can you talk to him? Just ask for 2 more weeks. I read it once. Then again, 30 seconds. That's how long I gave it. Then I typed back 1 word. No. The reply came almost instantly. That's cold. I stared at the screen. Then set my phone down. Cold wasn't the right word. Accurate was. Later that day, the landlord called. Just confirming, he said. You're not requesting an extension on their behalf? I'm not. Good to know. He mentioned something about you reconsidering. I let out a short breath. He doesn't speak for me. I figured, the landlord said. I've started the formal eviction process. They'll have 7 days before legal action begins. 7 days. A deadline that didn't involve me anymore. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for what happened next. The last time Evan called, I almost didn't answer. His name flashed across my screen. New number this time. Not blocked yet. For a second, I just stared at it. Curiosity won. I picked up. Are you happy now? He asked. His voice sounded different, flat, worn down, like something inside him had finally given up. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, staring out at the small balcony that had already become my favorite place in the apartment. I'm not unhappy, I said. A pause. We're getting evicted, he continued. Do you even understand what that means? I didn't answer right away, because I did understand. Evictions don't just end leases, they follow you for years. Make landlords hesitate. Close doors before you even knock. I understand consequences, I said finally. You didn't have to let it get this far, he snapped, some of the old edge returning. You could have called. You could have stopped this. I could have, I agreed. Silence stretched between us, but I didn't. His breath hitched. We won't be able to rent anywhere decent for years, he said, quieter now. Do you get that? I turned slightly, resting my shoulder against the wall. Maybe you should have thought about that, I said, before you brought your ex into my bed and blamed me for working. Another pause. Longer this time. I said I was sorry, he muttered. I closed my eyes briefly. No, you didn't. What? You said, you're always at work. What did you expect? I repeated. That's not an apology. That's you telling me it was my fault. He didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. After a moment, his voice came back, smaller. I didn't think you'd actually do anything. And there it was, the truth. Not just about him, about how he saw me. I know, I said softly. That's the problem. You're not the person I thought you were. I almost smiled. Funny, I said. I was thinking the same thing about you. I hung up before he could answer. 3 weeks later, it was over. Caleb left first, packed his things and moved back in with his parents in another state. I heard about it through the same mutual friend who had been updating me all along. Didn't go well, he told me. Apparently, they found out why he lost the apartment. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Evan stayed longer. Held out. Like he was waiting for something to change. For me to change. For reality to bend around him the way it always had before. It didn't. The eviction went through. Not just a notice.
A judgment. Something official. Permanent.
Something that would follow him for years. He ended up moving back in with his parents too. 45 minutes outside the city. No public transportation. No independence. A life that suddenly felt smaller. All because of choices he had insisted weren't his fault. A week after everything settled, I learned something new. Something that should have made me angrier, but didn't. Apparently, Evan and Vanessa hadn't just started seeing each other recently. It had been going on for months. 4, maybe longer. Late nights when I thought he was asleep. Evenings when I came home to them laughing on the couch. Moments I had dismissed as harmless. They weren't. I sat with that information for a long time, thinking about all the overtime shifts I had taken, all the nights I had come home exhausted, believing I was building something, a future, a life, something stable. But the truth was, it had already been broken, long before I knew it existed. And somehow, that didn't make me angrier. It made me certain that walking away had been the only choice. Some people might say I was too harsh, that I should have talked it out, gone to therapy, given him another chance. But here's the thing. He never asked for one. Not really. He didn't come to me with remorse. He didn't take responsibility. He didn't try to understand what he had done. He blamed me. He justified it. He showed up at my life, demanding I fix the consequences of his decisions. That's not someone asking for forgiveness. That's someone asking for permission to keep doing the same thing. And I was done giving that. My apartment is quiet now. I come home, cook dinner, sit on the balcony some nights with a drink, and just breathe. At first, the silence felt strange. Now it feels like peace. No tension, no suspicion, no waiting for something to go wrong. Just space. Space to exist without constantly giving more than I was getting. I've started dating again. Nothing serious. Just coffee, conversations, small moments that don't feel heavy. I ask different questions now. About values. About expectations. About what people think a relationship actually means. The last guy I went out with asked about my work hours. I told him the truth. They're demanding, I said, but they matter. And I'm not apologizing for having a career. He nodded. I respect that, he said. We're getting dinner next week. I don't think of myself as the hero of this story. I wasn't perfect. I ignored things I shouldn't have. Trusted people who didn't deserve it. Stayed comfortable when I should have asked harder questions. But I also learned something. Something simple. Something I won't forget again. I didn't lose a home. I stopped paying for one that was never really mine. And the peace I have now is worth more than anything I left behind.